Thank you for joining us for another opportunity of fellowship with This Is My Story, testimonies that move the soul. But before I go into some of the particulars about her background, I'd like to share a brief story with you. It's a Friday afternoon, and a young man is with his parents. They're shopping, and they're shopping in the city of Corona at a store that's barely 5 minutes from our residence. The man is in his early 30s. He seems a little bit animated and perhaps a little bit inquisitive. He's walking through the aisles with his parents, who clearly are a little bit older. And as curiosity would have it, he begins to engage with those that are around him and looking at those things that are closest to him. He spots a young girl that's in the arms of her father, and he's smitten by her evidently. He begins to engage with her and interact with her in his way. But the father is taken aback, and the father is offended, Dr. Cheree, and in his interpretation of the situation, so he says, he felt threatened by the actions of this man, a man that they would later find out was with his parents for a reason. You see, he had been diagnosed as having a mental disorder. That same day of this encounter, I happened to be shopping in the same shopping center. It caught my attention that there were units, police officers all around, and I was wondering what in the world is happening. I wanted to exit quickly because I couldn't find the point of origin and where everything was taking place. And then I saw where it was, and I said, I cannot go that direction, still uncertain of what the havoc was that had occurred. Well, shots were fired, and everyone scattered. They cleared out as fast as they could, running through the doors of a Costco shopping center, trying to find cover, not knowing what the circumstances were. At the end of that encounter there and that incident there in Costco, it would be discovered that there was one dead, and it wasn't the child, and it wasn't her father. It was the young man that was there with his parents, because the father, who they later discovered was a police officer off duty, felt threatened by the man who simply seemed to be engaging with the daughter. So it is said. They couldn't find any reason from the witnesses that were there as to why such a response required a reaction from this man. The off-duty officer quickly reached for his gun and he shot this man while individuals cleared, not knowing what the circumstances were. It would take weeks and months for the court system to determine what they should be doing and how they should be doing. And I'm not even saying that it's right or wrong what has taken place. But I was so curious about that situation, Dr. Cheree. It disturbed me. I wanted to know, where was the training to interpret the behavior of this gentleman? It seemed senseless to me because all the other individuals that were around could not trace back to any one thing that would cause a person to react so strongly that he would reach for his gun. He was an officer out of LA County, and he was put on administrative leave. And I believe that was without pay. But when it came to the court hearing and having taken the matter to court, it is my understanding that the family was not successful in their attempts to have him prosecuted. I believe they're now pursuing a civil case and using some of the witnesses that were there nearby. But it started, it appears, from a young man in his early 30s who seem to have a mental illness. As I reflect back on that, I'm wondering if you're like me. Sometimes when I'm driving and I see erratic behavior, it catches my attention. And unknowingly or knowingly, Dr. Cheree, I'll blurt out, is that person crazy?
Mhm.
It seems like we may use that word quite often.
Yeah.
And then there are other things that we observe. In fact, there are songs that are written about such behavior or about the emotion of crazy, almost as if we become cavalier about our interpretation of the word. How about that song, You See I'm Crazy for You, crazy in love for you? And then the song that says, I think I'm going out of my head. It seems to indicate that they're losing it. Well, whatever the circumstances are, chances are none of us want to sign up to deal with real crazy. None of us want to have to deal with mental illness. And yet, knowingly or unknowingly, we may be dealing with that, whether we signed up for it or not. It would appear, especially having seen the incidents this week, that mental illness is all around. And I'm not so sure we as a community have done what it is that we need to do to educate ourselves, to be informed as to how to interpret, how to respond, and how to engage. Those three factors are firsthand responses for our special guest today. She is a mental health advocate. She's a talk show host. She's the founder of an organization that seeks to empower and inspire women. She's also a financial guru in her own right. But what brought her to become a mental health advocate is one nightmare that she would not want to wish on anyone. But rather than be bitter and angry about it, she's taken life's hardest lessons for her experience and interpreted them to be shared to empower others who may be in the same pathway of mental health as herself. While I have not known her, we have not known her a very long time, I feel like I know her because I saw her heart. Yes. Her heart, her commitment. And I had the privilege, we had the privilege to intercede with her while in crisis by covering her in prayer.
Amen.
I didn't even know where she lived, didn't even really know her, I still don't know her middle name.
It's there.
She might tell us, but we covered and we bonded. I just started texting her prayers.
Amen.
Because I knew she was in crisis. And while one person was interpreting something else, I said something is wrong and I'm just going to keep covering her in prayer.
Yeah.
And that's where it started. And so I am overjoyed that now you get to share with us of the bounty that God has shared with you. And welcome to This Is My Story, testimonies that move the soul. We are just simply delighted and we get to be students at your feet. So Dr. Cheree Montgomery,
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be on here this afternoon. Just to tell my story, it is a journey. It's been approximately 10 years that I've been dealing with a son that has struggled with mental health. And I really wanted to take a time to kind of right now just read you. Can you hear me?
Excellent.
Yes. Yes. About where my story took place. And it's a little of my journal insert that I have. And it says, for the past 10 years, I have suffered in silence, afraid to speak out or share my battles to get treatment for my son. My story is so painful that I would hide it from my friends and my family members. I believe that if I shared with people, I would be belittled or feel that I have failed as a parent. I would walk around in pain and I would cry myself to sleep at night. I had so many restless nights that I can't even count. I would allow my troubles to hinder me from functioning to live my life. I would go to work every day and I would suffer at my desk silently. I took mental illness as if I had it myself. I often questioned God and asked him, why is he punishing us in this way? I often found myself on my knees praying and begging to God to remove this illness out our lives. I would ask him to deliver and heal my son. And I felt like God had actually turned his deaf ear
Wow.
on our situation. I needed him to perform a miracle that fast because of the pain was beginning to be too much for me to bear. A mother's love for a child is the strongest bond known to man. And I knew I wasn't the only parent in the world struggling with this difficult experience. I felt responsible as an individual to share my story and to share my testimony. And so that's where it all began for me. A woman, a parent, a mother, actually suffering in silence. Um, like anyone else, my story begins. I can actually remember it 10 years ago when it knocked on my door. My life was changed forever. It was 11 o'clock one night, and I received a phone call from Hollywood Police Department. I said, I don't know anybody. And so I don't know if you ever had the point where you look at the phone, it's a number that's unfamiliar. And sometimes you'll say, oh, that can go to voicemail. I don't recognize that number. And something said, answer the phone. And so I reached for the phone and I answered it and they said, hello, this is Officer Barrett from Hollywood Division. And I was like, oh, hi, how can I help you? And she was saying that she had my son in custody. And I was like, what could he have done? He was 18 years old, just turned 18. And I said to myself, I'm saying, what is going on? And it's that gut feeling that you get, like, I hope nothing has happened. I, know what kind of accident, what's going on for the police, and it's not him contacting me, what could be going on? And she got on the phone and she said, I have your son in custody at the Hollywood Division, not so much arresting him, but what happened was I noticed him driving sporadically throughout Hollywood. Now we live way in Corona. So I'm like, how did he get there? What's going on? And she thought he was an intoxicated driver. And it was an African-American female. Let me tell you how God works. And she said, oh, she said to me, she said, I think I got him. I know that's a drunk driver. I'm going to pull him over. And she pulled him over. And the first thing he said, I'm lost. I don't know where I'm at. Can you help me, ma'am? And she said, then she knew it wasn't so much of an intoxicated driver because he was begging for help. She pulled him over. She looked, she did all the things to check to see if he was intoxicated. And she noticed that that wasn't it. So long story short, she called me and she said, I need you to get to the Hollywood Division. Here I am in Corona because I have your son. And she said, ma'am, I don't think it's about drugs. I don't think he's intoxicated. I think it's some kind of mental break. And it was very painful for me. So what happened was I went there, and as I walked into the police station, took me an hour to get there, I noticed the change in my son's eyes, and he didn't look the same. And if if you know your kids, you know when things are all right, when they're not, but something in the eyes told me that he was not okay. So at that time, he was talking out of his head. He was doing all kind of things. And it was very, my decision was I needed to get him from the police station to get help. So on the way back, I was continually stopping at hospitals trying to get him help because I went to the first hospital. they told me, well, ma'am, they talked to him, we would get seen, and they would say, it doesn't look like he's a danger to himself because he's not saying that he's going to hurt himself. But at this time, he was talking to himself, he was hearing voices. He wasn't, to me, he wasn't himself. Long story short, we went to about 4 hospitals and no one would help me. But you could tell that my son was having this psychotic break. And so I was, what happened was, we felt defeated. I had called all my family members on. I said, something's wrong with Javion. Now, so a lot of family members came over and we were sitting around like it was maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. And so we wind up going to a hospital in Corona, Corona Regional. And at that time, I said, I'm going to try one more time because that was near the house. And a doctor saw us. And I guess it was my prayers and the look in my face. He decided that he would put a hold and help me with my son. Um, going back a little bit, and I hope you're following me. My son was an 18-year-old that was headed to college, an A student. He was a basketball star. He was on his way to UCLA. And he was going because he had recruits looking at him. The UCLA coach was calling me. He was graduating. This was his senior year. He was headed to play for the team of UCLA. And so all this time, this is when that break happened, when he was in the 12th grade. And so I didn't know if it was drug induced, what was going on with my son. And so the journey began on that night. And so once I took him to Corona Regional, they decided that they were going to place him on a 5150 hold. I'm an educator, I know certain terms, but I really didn't know about mental health. Being a teacher and an educator, I was introduced to mental health on a whole different level by when it impacts your child. So they put my son on a 5150 hold. And that's when the road began of me understanding mental health. And I would say, well, I saw other families struggling with it, but I never had dealt with it myself. So the journey began, and they introduced me to a whole bunch of medicines that he would need because they knew that he was also dealing with some kind of depression. And so my goal was to get him the help that he needs. And then the journey began, I started to research a lot because when it impacts your home, you go, what can I do to fix this problem? Because as women, we're fixers and nurturers. So I'm going, how can I help him get to a place where we're past this? So he came home after they kept him for about 2 weeks, and he still wasn't the same. He was withdrawn in his room on a lot of medications. So then I started researching, and my main goal was I needed to find him a psychiatrist and a therapist that we were both comfortable with. So that took a lot of time and a journey. And I finally found out I wanted that person to be an African American and somewhat have a Christian background as well. So it took me a while and a lot of research to find a person. I found a doctor that could help us. And that became a journey in itself because every week I would have to take my son to see the psychiatrist and learn more and more about depression, psychosis, all these things that I was not familiar with. So that impacted us very, very much. So on this journey, we we would have good days and bad days. He started withdrawing from family, isolating himself. At the same time, it was such a painful experience as a mother to watch your son go through the battle. Um, and so once we started to get deeper, they started to diagnose him, and they were saying that it looks like he may have schizophrenia. there's other things that could be going on with him. With my son, it's not just about a quiet person that's withdrawn. He would have episodes where he's walking or frantic and what they call mania, where he's manic and he's walking around talking to himself, even somewhat hyper over, like one example is jumping out of a moving car, walking down the street and unapproachable. So those are the things I was dealing with that I was impacted with, let alone at that time I was a principal of a school. And so at sometimes at night, I'm staying up all night watching him, observing him, trying to figure out because of the medication or him not, it's not working. So we went through trials and tribulations also with medication. Um, does anyone have any questions or anything which you would like to me to go deeper in regarding my story? Because I don't want to, I do want to open it up if anyone has any kind of questions for me at this point.
Yes, Dr. Montgomery, can you please explain the difference? I mean, explain 5150 hold for people?
Yes, a 5150 is what they're saying that they could be a danger to themselves. And so they will put them on what they call a 72-hour hold. And that's a time where the doctor will say that they cannot leave and they hospitalize them. And sometimes it's in a facility, a lockdown facility for 72 hours where they're trying to stabilize that person or figure out how they can help them with their mental mental health that is going on, their mental crisis that they're dealing with now. And so most of the time, a doctor and police can also claim any of your family members that they're putting them on a 5150 hold. Me as a parent can't say 5150. I need to put them on a hold. But as time went on, I had to wind up what they call getting conservatorship over my son because of his mental things that he was going to, that I needed to get control, because once they're a certain age, you don't have any control because of the HIPAA laws. So I also battled that because he had his break at 18. They did not want to share a lot of his history. So as a parent or any advocate or anyone that's taking care of someone with mental illness and they're adult, you are kind of blindsided because if they give the okay to talk to you, but if they don't have the mental capacity to say it's okay to talk to my mom or talk to my caregiver, then they will not share certain things. And a lot of times there are people that check themselves in the hospital and you as a family member don't even know it because they're going through all the things that they're going through. And then you would have to call around and they still won't tell you, because there have been times that he was lost and I didn't know where he was because he has a tendency at time to walk off and do things when he is not in his full capacity. And I've called around hospitals and they're unwilling to share that they may even have him. And at one time, God bless God, I was on a 3-day trying to find him. And somewhat, I just kept being persistent with one hospital and she wound up saying, yeah, he's here. So it depends. And then that's when I decided that I needed conservatorship over my son so that when I call, I can send him my paperwork and I can have all access to his mental health and what is going on. But it takes you a while. You have to go to court. You have to have support of social workers to get into that capacity to get conservatorship over someone. And that means their mental state. That can also mean their financials. Once they're deemed incompetent in that aspect because of their mental health, it lasts only a year. So each year I have to renew my conservatorship with my son.
So before you go on, Dr. Montgomery, would you elaborate on what is a description for schizophrenia?
Yes, one of the things that for him, for my son, his case is that well, my son, he has a dual diagnosis of depression and schizophrenia, where the personalities are different personalities that come out where somewhat he even sometimes they're wondering if he even has split personalities because the moods are so affluent and changing and depends on what he's going through. That can be the capacity of he's in his 20s. Sometimes he can act like he is 11, as far as where as far as his mindset it is. Talking to himself, it brings on what they call manic, where you're talking to yourself, you're walking around paranoid. He could hear the TV talking to him. He could hear shadows talking to him. What else? Agitated, very agitated. Meaning that certain things, if you say certain trigger words, that could cause him to get, belligerent, upset, screaming, depending. I've witnessed my son running down the street in his underwear. And I'm calling the police. And let's get back to even like someone was saying about the fear. The first time he was diagnosed and he was walking, I was having these troubles. I was fearful. I didn't want to pick up my phone to call the police because of what I know about the police in African-American males. And so I was hesitant. I said, I need to fix this myself. And in Corona, they don't have any kind of team or anything to help you. It's the police, 911. And so I got on the phone with 911 because it had got bad one night at 2 a.m. in the morning. I'm in the middle of the street and I didn't want to get hurt or ran down, and I'm trying to calm him down and talk to him. So I call 911 and I go through the spiel. He does not have any weapons. He's off his medication. I immediately go into, let me describe the situation. Let me explain what's going on in hopes that I won't get a cop that's untrained, that doesn't understand and see. 10 years ago, you think they don't know anything now. 10 years ago, it still was a part of police not being trained properly to understand mental health. So what my fear was that they would come and they would not de-escalate the situation, but escalate, sometimes depending on who you call. In the past 10 years, I may have called the cops, now police, a couple of times, and I've had good cops that may have had a family member that have suffered with some kind of mental illness. I've had where they have blew the situation out of control, where they pulled guns on him and he didn't have anything. And depending, that was Corona PD. And then I have some because I have put him in different places because I have friends that have different, they're psychiatrists, they have homes and they're giving me referrals. When I was in Los Angeles, they have a lot more training than a lot of other cities. They refer me to what they call a PET team, and this PET team comes out, and what they do is a psychiatrist that you talk through with your situation, you're saying that your loved one is off their medication, and they come to that situation, and the police come as well, but they diagnose them there and take them to the hospital. A lot of times when I'm meeting officers, they don't know what to do. They're questioning, does he have any weapons? Does he have anything? And I have to be clear, because when I see different articles, for me, it's very scary because I see myself in that situation. And I thank God that I wasn't the lady or the situation that happened in Costco. I thank God that we haven't been the situation where the family member, she was driving and got mixed up because she was having a breakdown and they shot her and killed her. There's so many stories that I have ran across and helped different people and family members and friends that I'm totally understand how those situations could go wrong immediately. with dealing with with someone that's dealing or struggling with mental health. One of the things that I had to learn quickly was, how can I be an advocate for him? And that was me doing a lot of research and understanding what we're dealing with. How does it feel for him? Because it's not just painful for the person that's going through. They know that there's something wrong, but also as a parent to somewhat watch your loved one who is suffering, and to find treatment has also been a struggle, because they feel when they're taking their medication that they're doing better, and they will get off of their medication. And also that's a time that some people turn to other things that, instead of taking medication, drugs, marijuana, alcohol has also been a problem with what we're facing with his mental illness, because of the fact that he feels that that is helping him, and is truly not.
So Dr. Cheree, what do you understand to be a point of origin for mental illness, and how was one able to decipher between whether or not this was a mental health crisis or a bad trip with some drugs?
Yeah, and that's the thing, because it lasts the time of it's all about the way he was talking, the withdrawalness, the not speaking clearly, um, and also watching him as far as change. The change came out, and it's almost, they're kind of parallel. That's why a lot of people have difficulties diagnosing people, because once they even start with being drug addicted and also dealing with mental health, they are somewhat neck and neck on some of the behaviors. And so it's very hard. But with me, it's me constantly getting him the help that he needs and walking through the things that, because when it impacts you, like one family that I know, um, she was on a family trip. They were coming back, and her daughter is in college, and her daughter had a psychotic break on the plane, and they had to detour the plane. So there's been behaviors that are so extreme that you know that it is some kind of mental crisis that is going on, whether it's screaming, whether it's talking to themselves, whether it's the isolation, they're irritated, irritable, showing those kind of things, not keeping up with themselves as far as hygiene. That is an effect, like they're not bathing. Um, they're not taking care of things that you find, that you get up out of the bed every day, you brush your teeth, you take a shower. You may see a lack in those kind of things. They will not want to do that. Not being able to even pick up clothing, materials, their room. There's changes that come, but because of the depression and the mental capacity of things that they're going through and their health challenges, those are struggles that I observe. There are some things when he was a child that sometimes I would go through and I would say, was that a sign that my son may have had? And one of the things was disorganization, very disorganized, but I thought it was typical of, he's a boy. And so I would go, no, you need to clean up. You need to get your room together. There were certain things that I had expectations for that I would fuss about. And I wish certain things as a child, I may have gotten him help a lot sooner. If as a parent, but there's always these, what could I have done better? With him, we're finding that uh, you know, it's not through family. What I'm hearing now that we started talking, a lot of the basketball players and athletes, they use marijuana. And so I don't know if someone had given him bad marijuana, but he was just, playing a lot of basketball in high school. And he said his first experience was with marijuana was with his basketball team. And so that could have triggered those behaviors his senior year as well. And I don't know if it was laced with something or that spiraled the mental health. Because then I started looking at family and, who has struggled with mental health, because it has been such back when we were growing up that no one talked about mental illness. It was, or we knew somebody in our family, and it has touched our families, but we would keep it quiet. Even as far as someone dealing with addiction to alcohol or drugs, it was a silence. You really didn't. You talked about it in the house, but it wasn't, well, we need to get that person counseling. We need to get that person help. And so that has always been, we've all had an uncle or someone that may have been struggling with something. And like you said, some people will say, oh, he's just crazy, leave him alone. And we never dealt with the situation. He could be in the corner at the family function, sitting on the side, and we never ever would deal with that situation till he may have become violent or did something, and they would say, oh, he acting crazy. But we never dealt with the impact of getting that person kind of help, because it's just something we never did in the Black community.
Dr. Montgomery, you answered several of my questions that I had, but the one that I have right now is, does he have any siblings? And
Yes. Yes.
How did the siblings notice anything specific as they were growing up, or mention anything to you about his behavior?
My oldest son, and I have a younger son and an older son, so he's the middle child. They went through, this has been the most painful experience for them all. As far as my oldest and my middle son, they always were very, very close and played basketball together and did things together. He never noticed, but the change happened. It all impacted us quickly, so fast, because just like one night, our lives were changed. And he says often, that was my best friend. It's very hard to reach him right now. And so that was a change for my son, especially my oldest son, because they were very close. They grew up together. We never noticed, I mean, any kind of straight, he's always been very, very a great artist. He was a kid that did not study often. He received straight A's. When it impacted us, it was the beginning, like the end of the 11th through the 12th grade, where the change happened. The grades started falling off. But until then, we really didn't notice any kind of strange behavior, because he was inundated. He would be a kid that played basketball all the time, went to school, came home, and was always training. But then the decline happened, and the change started happening in that 11th. And I was doing certain things as an educator, but I was fussing as mom, like, you need to get yourself together. You're falling apart. What's going on? Why aren't you keeping up with your grades? And the educator in me. But at no point that my other sons, none of them, use marijuana or smoke, but it was the kids, the privileged kids, because we were at that time living in Eastville, and a more middle class, upper class thing, where they can have more access to getting what drugs are everywhere. But I'm saying, as far as kids bringing certain things to school and using, they were more, because they do have a lot more time, because a lot of parents, I noticed on my block, were working, trying to live, keep up with their bills and their money. So a lot of them, the kids were, a lot of them, are on their own at a certain point as far as latchkey, going home, doing things of that nature. No, I had to work, so I was a working mom. So those are kind of different things that, we went through as a family.
Thank you.
So what are some of, before we move on to your next crisis, because you've been in crisis recently,
Yes,
and this is 10 years later,
yes.
and you went through a major crisis. But before I have you explain that, tell me, what were some of the safeguards, some of the parameters that you had to implement for your home, for your family, for the ability as a parent
Mhm.
to be able to function with this new knowledge of
Yes.
the diagnosis that indicates that your son has mental illness? What were some of those steps and parameters that you had to implement?
A lot of it, I did a lot of family meetings, and talking about how in therapy. And I was fortunate that the psychiatrist, even before I went to court and had conservatorship, that I did, like I told you, I did the research, found me someone that included me, which a lot of them would say, well, I can't talk to you about that. He would say, let's have your mom come in. And I would get firsthand in him communicating about what was going on with my son, what were some of his triggers. Also, one of the things we talked about is how do we handle those situations when he is having somewhat of some mental health challenges in our home. One of the things was I took away dangerous objects. I had to even take away firearms, anything that was in danger had to come out my home when we were going through this crisis, because I haven't believed you don't want them, even though you have lock boxes and certain things. Sometimes kids even know where lock boxes keys are. So one of the things, I brought that to a family friend's home. I did get rid of all my like sharp utensils and stuff, because I don't know, it's the mind is very tricky. You don't know. And a lot of people talk about, as a parent, a lot of people were shocked that I was so involved in my son's mental health. I wanted to know detail by detail. And a lot of, when I go to different places and I speak, a lot of families, once the child starts dealing with all these mental challenges, they give up or they're not there. Me, I was going to every appointment, getting to know and understand the disease along with him so he wouldn't feel alone and by himself. We've had times where things have been excellent, but we have never, ever in the past 10 years gone without some kind of psychotic episode or some kind of thing in a year. It's been up and down, because once he starts feeling better, he would decline, stop taking his medicine, using other avenues to substitute, to think that that's medication, whether it's marijuana. And he really thinks marijuana is helping with him, which is in actuality, it is destroying him as far as function, because it does not go well with medication. And with dealing with someone with mental health, it's very dark. It's a dark place for them. And when you have where they may be even addicted to drugs, it becomes very a dark place where he's listening to dark music. So one of the things that I did was try to introduce him to self-care, meditation. I put him in yoga classes. Even for myself, I had to get therapy for myself because of the pain that I was, feeling towards that. So one of the things is that journaling was one of the exercises that we use. Getting him in yoga, learning how to meditate. I bought him a lot of books on meditation, and it did work and help in some instance. One of the things was that I have where I wanted him to start, writing down how was his day, and we could talk about it. Some of those things did work, some of those things didn't, depending on what level or what challenges that he's having. If he's having a hard time, then those things did not work.
So some of the
Um,
parameters that you put in place were for both you
and him
and
and my
him.
family. Yeah.
So two more things before
Uh-huh.
going forward. You mentioned early on, he was a promising young man who
Yes.
was headed to play basketball
Yes.
for UCLA, excuse me. And he was a straight A student. And he seemed to have a life that heavily involved
Yes.
basketball. So now what does a typical day for him look like? What did his days evolve to after discovering he has mental illness? And did he still have a desire to function in the roles that had been identified with him and linked with him? Was that still there? Was the passion still there? And what have you noticed over this course of 10 years now with where he was and where he is today?
Yeah, he isolated himself because I think he was ashamed of his illness. He stopped playing, very withdrawn. He'll be in a room all day. Do you want something to eat? And you're trying to make it vibrant in the house and talk to him, and he's resisting all that. And so it would go to the point of he lost interest in basketball. You talk about somebody that played basketball every day. I don't want to play anymore. I don't want to be around friends. And then his friends, he had friends, and all of a sudden, no friends are around because he felt that they were saying things about him. And it gets around now. I don't know what's going on with him. He's changed. He looks different, in the community. So he went through withdrawals and let's go to church. And my parents and my grandfather was a minister. Sunday was about church and all that. It would be a big blow up. It became a big blow up of let's go to church. He withdrew from everyone because he didn't want to see anyone. He wanted to stay by himself and isolate himself, listening to depressing, dark music. So I had to start exposing him to different things like, let's try yoga, let's try meditation. I'll pay for a class. Let's try some kind of art class because I needed him to get out of, that
Depressive mode
depression
that he was in, the dark
that
space
he
that he
was
was
in.
in.
Yes. There has been times where it had gotten so bad where he has gotten violent, put holes in walls, um, cussed out people, um, uh, did and my sons, I'll never forget my youngest son graduated from high school. He decided to have a breakdown and police were called while my son is graduating. He somewhat had an episode at the graduation. So sometimes it was like me saying, well, maybe I should leave him alone, because we brought him to the graduation and he had an episode. The sheriffs came, everything, because he was acting out with friends in front of a stadium full of people. So
So
yeah,
I have to ask you, and no disrespect whatsoever, I think you know that. What are who are his role models in terms of a male figure? And where is his dad in the whole situation? Because I
you
know
know,
you were married to a minister, a
yeah.
prominent minister in the Orange County area,
Yeah.
and you've had a
He
village
wasn't a
of
minister. He was
sorts.
the minister of music, yes.
Yeah,
But
well,
yeah, same thing. But we were in the um withdrawn. Acceptance of that from his father was very hard. So I come from a strong education background. All my siblings are educators. I have 5 of them. One is a principal. I was a principal. So my dad was a professor. My mom was an English teacher. So the support as far as male roles, his uncles, everyone, my dad. But during these 10 years, my dad wound up being also on dialysis and struggling with his health. And his dad, it was too much for him. And that put a damper on our relationship as well. But as far as that barrier, it was hard. Sometimes it's hard for males to somewhat deal with, and I'm running into this a lot with the families that I speak with, them accepting like, no, maybe we need to just, beat them up. They come up with these rationales. No, I'm just being honest, like, because I'm not trying to be funny, because their perspective, they just need somebody to shake it out of them, beat it out of them, it'll be all right. No, that's not mental health. This is not how it go. And I'm just, in the African American, I run into it all the time. My husband said that he needed, kicked and he'll be better. And I'm like, no, that's not it. Oh, he's doing that on purpose. No. And so it goes into, I'm just being frank, because I run into people all the time that their husband has this perspective that they can change it by, even acting in a violent way. I said, no, that's not the answer. And so we laugh about that, because people think, that manhood, and then they're feeling like they did something. As a parent, it is hard to accept. Like I told you, my struggle was, I was looking at myself like, hey, I'm an educator. I have all these degrees. I help people. I've had school campuses full of 1,000 kids. And you mean I can't handle this one booger that's in my house,
Mercy.
But because I was so into not accepting what I was going through. And I was like, I fix all these kids at school when there's a problem. I'm not going to let this overtake me. And man, I got defeated. And I was like, that's what it took me back to my own depression. Like, I can't win. I don't know what to do. And so I had to start, and it was one angel, and I call her my angel. Her son went through the same thing. It was my mother's girlfriend. And we connected. And then you tell you how God will put people in your life in that time, in that season. And she walked me through everything, because even as an educator, I didn't know anything about 5150 holds. What is this? Holding them longer than that. What is that classify? What is, I didn't even know. And the behaviors. And I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own house, temperament, because he was dictating how my house would be ran, because we were like walking around saying, well, we don't want to trigger him and our whole day will be ruined, or our house will be in an uproar. And so we battled with that a lot, very much so. And I've struggled with where he decided he wanted to be homeless, because he said he was too much to bear on the family, where I had to walk in homeless camps looking for my son. Recently, he went on a tangent, said, I give up, I'm going to be homeless. And he was missing. And he went a week. And at this time, I didn't know where he was, and crying my eyes out, trying to figure out, and he's getting older now. And so there's times that where I'm expecting more growth, it seems like we're not getting there. It seems like there's an increase of drug usage, and there's an increase of now, because once they start going in and out of medication, they become more and more violent. And when he would not use profanity at me and respected me as his mom, I'm starting to see that declining, and the things that he's saying. And you could be like, sometimes you see someone and you say, well, why is that grown man calling that woman a B? I never thought I'd be, you know what I mean? And see, your automatic response is, oh, I'll show you one. But they're having some kind of mental, breakdown, different things. And see, a lot of people look at situations like even the guys that did the Buffalo, that's somebody's child. Okay. And imagine, I never would have thought, and I'm not saying that I condone any of that. But even when the mom don't even know, because she has even the one that did the Texas shooting, because the system is so broken. Recently, not even a month ago, my son had a breakdown, and I called them at 11:30 and said, I need assistance. They did not come to my house until 2:50. So here I am, I have to go and say, what's going on? Then they're apologizing, but as these 2 hours were 2 hours of horror for me and my family, because he's yelling, having outbursts, screaming, doing all this threatening. And I'm on the phone with the 911 operator, called her 4 times. Say, this situation is getting out of hand. Can you help me? Can you help me? Nothing. They're on their way. They're on their way. So I've had, in these 10 years, I have traveled through certain things and seen the eyes. And when I'm getting back to the mom, when she was saying, forgive my son, forgive me, it's hard to see how, because even as a principal, I'm sorry to say, I've noticed kids that I go, he's very dark. Something's going wrong. But we don't even have we call the parent and they're resistant for help. And then he's 18. There's only something. That's why she moved into the grandmother. You do this. I have moved my son to my mother's house, she's thinking that she's supporting us. Then I put him in different places. Now I know that he can't live with any of us because it's triggered. It does not help his mental health. But as far as him, the isolation, the internet is the most, and people use it, I don't care what they say, that's the most evilest, darkest place for a person that's struggling with mental health.
Mercy. Mercy. Wow, that's a statement right there.
And because they even have different chat rooms. And if you already have low self-esteem, feeling like you don't know what is being like one guy, we went to a forensic psychiatrist one time, and he said, this is what your son is hearing. You ain't no good. You nothing. I don't know why you don't kill yourself. You're worthless. Look at you. He gave me examples of what someone's like, and that is not, no, you sometimes think that's that one time. It's a repeat. It's a repeat that never stops. And they're like, please stop. I don't want to hear it anymore. Yeah, look at your mom. And sometimes the person that they love the most is a person that they attack the worst. And you're like, I'm your mama. I'm here to help you. So you don't even know what, as far as some of these people that deal with a mental person are dealing with in their heart. That is somewhat, I have had to say that I have been on days where I felt like, Lord, help me, how I'm gonna get through it. And, back in the day, my dad is from Compton, my mom is from Long Beach. I've had where I've seen everything. But this is a difference, where you're like, I don't want to hurt my child. I don't want him to hurt me. What can I do to put in these precautions? And one of the things is that I had to put him in different homes and become an advocate from outside, because when he was in there, it was not helping him. And so if anything, I've learned that I'd rather help him and resource in than him being with me, because it's like you're walking on eggshells, and it wasn't good for my mental health either. Watching it, and then it's a battle. Did you take your medicine today? Now he feels like he's a child. Did you take your medicine today? How you feeling? And you have to have that when you're dealing with somebody, but they are more acceptive of someone that's in a home, another adult, than is coming from your mom, because he'll tell them, she treated me like a child. No, I want to make sure that you stay balanced and we don't have any episodes. So, that's a battle in itself. Telling somebody, how's your mental health today? And then you don't know, when you're waking up with someone that's dealing with something, who they're going to be in the morning. Is he going to have a good day, or is he gonna have a bad day? His bad day can turn my day upside down because I'm getting phone calls when I'm a director of Chino Valley at that time. I'm getting phone calls. Oh, your son is destroying the house. Your son is doing this. The people at your job don't want to hear that because you have a responsibility there. So here I'm battling a son that's dealing with mental health crisis. And okay, I got a crisis at a school. So I'm trying to be all these things, wearing all these hats. And let me just say something. The hardest thing I thought was being a mother. The hardest thing that happened to me is being a conservator, because you have to say, no, you can't do that. And then he's looking at you, but you my mom. No, this is not good for you. So it's been just very, very hard for us as and mental illness hits every race. It doesn't matter with your background, your social economical background. It can impact you so differently. One of the things is that that I have noticed is that though when you're seeking help, there is very few that will go beyond themselves. Even when he is getting social workers and everything, there are some social workers have no clue. There's some police officer that you just have to pray that you run into the right person. A lot of my journey has been through prayer, meditation, and God leading me in the right direction because of the fact that I'm on the phone with them and they don't care. Or it's just so many people that are struggling that they don't even have the time. Okay, here's another, and they don't see the family as a whole. They see it as a problem that maybe they can fix. Let me shoot these little numbers. There's been times that they say, well, I don't know what you're going to do, but here's this piece of paper referral. You can call all those and maybe you can get some help somewhere. But you're the social worker. Aren't you supposed to be there to help him? And there's been doctors that have been very supportive and understand who I can talk to. And there's been times that we've had doctors that, why are you in that profession? Because you're sure not helping the situation. And then another thing, when you're dealing with someone with mental health, they do not have a system, which I'm advocating for, that they keep all their records in one place, because most of the time, mental health patients are transit. I'm over here, I'm over there, because there are not enough beds in places, there's not enough hospitals. So sometimes I have to skip counties to get help. So he has cases in Orange County, he has cases in Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Riverside. Look, my son has had help at all these places, because I had to go where I could get the resources. I don't wish anybody in San Bernardino. The officers are untrained. And they're saying, I don't know what they're doing to even get. That's why they're walking around. It's so many homeless walking around, impactments and things that are going on, because they don't even have enough resources or places to help people that are struggling with mental health crises in San Bernardino County.
You've given so much to ponder, and there's no way to deal with such a topic in just the brief time that we have. But this is Mental Awareness Month. And I noticed that in recent weeks and even the past couple months, there's been a lot of discussion, because individuals are cognizant of the fact that the population, it would appear to them that someone has assessed that our current population as a high percentage of those that are suffering from mental health. In fact, I took the liberty of just getting some stats, and it says 21%, the current US population in 2020, I should say, which equates to 52.9 million. Or let me go a step further, 1 out of every 5. So husband, it would appear at least 4 or 5 individuals currently on Star Guest have some form of mental illness if I'm going to adopt these numbers for us from 2020. But having heard that, it also would appear that at some point in time, we perhaps are going to have to deal with someone who has
Yes.
mental illness.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, from our schools to our communities where we reside, to our church communities where we worship, to the events that individuals go to, public events, concerts, and Disneyland, and some of these things. What are what are the possibilities that you are going to have to encounter someone who has been diagnosed with mental health, who begins to have a breakdown or a crisis? What would be your tips for us as individuals, assuming that we are normal and not like them?
Yeah.
Because
so-
I'm wondering how I would encounter or how I would personally respond to
Mhm.
someone in the store I'm shopping and they have a breakdown and turn around and call me a B. I'm struggling with that one.
Yeah.
I'm
And
not
most
so sure I got time
yeah.
to assess that you have a mental illness and that's why you're doing this. I have to admit, if I were to be honest, I'm not so sure I would get to that point to be
Yeah.
able to decipher, oh,
Yeah.
I know you must be crazy. No, it's a different kind of crazy. No, you're straight out crazy because you just called me a what? And you know, I'm going down that road. I'm pulling a Medea up in the camp because
Yeah.
that's where our mind goes. And so
Yeah.
I'm wondering,
Like I said, there's chances are you can call the police. You can, when you see those kind of things, but there's been situations where, oh, we ignore so much in our society right now. And I don't know, because do we look at people when we're on the plane, when we're in the doctor's office? The human contact has kind of diminished because we are isolated into our cell phones. It was a time that we could tell and talk to someone and say, you know, he's struggling with something, because you would communicate with them. Half the time, if you just look around sometimes, and I had to be conscious of that, is that we're on our phones. We don't even really say, hey, you know, we may say, hey, but sooner or later, we're on our phones looking and not paying attention, not a human touch of looking and getting to know someone. So who befriends them is, I could be like this Texas shooter. He could be in Texas talking to someone in Idaho that has some problems, that is giving him some communication and talking to him and persuading him, get an R-15. Now let's talk about, the world is against us. The world is against me too. And they have these dark chat rooms. And the high school students know a lot about them because I work with high school students. But I'm just saying, like, even as far as being bullied on the internet, we get so caught. It's like on one campus, it's almost 1,000 kids. We can't even there's no counselors, they're half-time, part-time. And to actually, you have to live it. How, as a principal, when someone can't, luckily we have to teach people how, if they see something, to say something. And it took my kids a long time. I had to place those things inside my school, that I have an open door policy, that you can talk to us. You can come see Miss Montgomery. I'm gonna be visible on my campus. What's going on here? One of the things, even before, when Sandy Hook happened, I was a principal. I was in an all-white school district. And I came in there as an African-American woman, and they had the campus all open. And I said, if someone comes in here shooting, and everything is open. So I put gates up, and there were only one way to get in to this campus. And parents were upset with me as a principal. Why are you locking us up? This is our community. But times were changing. I had to move them in the correct direction and show them what I became. And I even developed an active shooter manual for my school. And I also even took it further, that I had it where you can anonymously make tips and a hotline if someone is threatening you, because when we say goodbye to them, they go home. Parents do not monitor the internet. They don't know what kids are doing. We've got away from values, family values, of even sitting down and having dinner. You're eating dinner, fast food, even if what happened to just the human touch. So we don't know what's going on. He goes, sometimes a typical thing of a high school student is they go home, and not in every household, they grab some fast food. The child goes because they're working on their homework, maybe go in their room and eat their food, not even at a dinner table anymore. They're in isolation.
Really.
They're sending nudity pictures to guys that are requesting. They're sexting. And some of us, even me being younger than them, a lot of parents are not savvy with the internet. They don't know half of the things on how they could put safety precautions on half of these devices in the house. So it becomes also a thing that is a part of mental health. When we are allowing all these things to in our household that are demonic. So it becomes that. And so as me going through all this with my son, I'm saying, what can be done? Because I see the younger generation that are raising their kids, and it's not getting any, we are being shocked, but all we're saying is, let's pray for them. Oh, what's going, but we're not putting any action behind it in changing the things that we're doing, the outreach. A couple of churches are now getting on the bandwagon with mental health. I know a couple of churches, if you guys want to go and look, where they're now doing outreach, and they have mental, they're hiring psychiatrists and therapists for their campuses on their churches, which is making a heavy impact, because it's needed.
Amen.
It's
Amen. Well, I appreciate that response. We have a question, and we're going to open it up before we close out. I know we can't cover everything, but we appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing. And then I know that there's some other things to be shared. And I have two announcements after we get through doing it. We have some educators
long-winded for you, but it is a long story because it develops and it gets bigger and bigger. But
surely,
if I could just help someone along this journey. I had to take this pain and switch it. That's why I'm such an advocate for an understanding, and someone reach out to me with all kinds of situations, but is learning what can we do to support one another in this journey.
surely. Misha, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Dr. Cheree, I've noticed that when there's a person with a drinking problem, we call them a person with a drinking problem.
Yes.
If they have a drug problem, we call them a person with a drug problem. But when we have someone with mental health issues, we call them everything but a person with.
Yes.
I think as Christians, we need to bring back that humanitarianism. My study is mental health counseling and trauma.
Yes.
So I've been really on that, changing the language.
Yes.
Of how we see individuals, because they didn't ask for these issues. You can't ask for genetic issues. You can't ask for biological trauma issues. You can't ask for that. There are things that's just how their body has wired itself for survival. In fact, else they probably wouldn't have made it that far. So I think, sometimes as Christian, when we see somebody, when Deb said, if I see somebody in the store and I don't know how I'd act, first thing I tell people is, when you look at the situation, look at the person. Okay, look at the person that is doing the act. Look at the environment they're in. Look at that, empathize with them, because sometimes they're out of their, like you said, they're out of their normal environment. Control is an issue with people with mental health issues. Consistency is an issue with people with mental health issues. So they could be out of their consistent environment. So sometimes we just have to be compassionate. There's some people they uncomfortable because other people have to like shop and cook. You know what I mean? There's a mother I see every evening in the Food for Less by my house. Her son has autism. So someone on the spectrum who's out of their consistency and their environment. He's loud, he's crying, he's screaming, he's everything. And I turn around and everybody else, Black mothers be like, somebody need to get the strap to him. He needs some of this, he needs some papa, something. But I turned around. I had that was my trigger. But then when I turned around and I seen how the little boy was screaming and crying, I walked up to him and started singing a song to him while the mother was she was frustrated trying to pay the bill, trying to pay for the food because he kept hitting her and everything. So I started singing to him and he calmed down and then he fell asleep. And she just looked at me with tears in her eyes. And I said, you know what? I too are like these people yelling. I'm no different, except I turned around and looked first. Had I not, I would have triggered into that same condition. I'm just asking, maybe perhaps as Christians, let's recondition our mind on how we respond. Let's turn around and actually look at what's going on.
Amen.
Wow, thank you. Go ahead,
Can I
Dr.
say this
Cheree.
real quick?
Surely.
The Texas shooter, Sergio Ramos, he was on the internet killing animals, doing all these things, and for months, showing guns. None of the kids said anything. Like it was normal behavior. Saying things that he was going to do something to women, all these things. Now, after he committed the situation as it went to that level, then people started saying, well, he was doing this and he was doing that. That's what I mean as far as we have to have it where we recognize certain things, and just like even the man from New York, he had sat in front of that store the day before talking to a man. And if somebody may have paid attention, we get so focused, because I even do it myself. Sometimes I'm like, I'm so distracted, because the internet, all these things that is a curse, but it's good, but then it's bad because we don't, there's been times that somebody might have observed, why is he in the all Black neighborhood, this white guy sitting out there, and you may have said, let me call the police. If you see somebody killing cats on the internet, what happens to those little advocates that say, oh, mommy's killing cats? And maybe, law enforcement may have did something. But I'm just saying there's always a lot of warning signs, but we are so distracted as a human race that we miss so much. And, and it's just where we are, but we have to, and I don't even know if we can slow down, just to start observing and understanding and having compassion, like she said, and understanding what's going on and reaching out and saying, well, what can I do to help?
Very good. Any questions or comments, remarks? I have one. I know that tell the truth, internet takes our children's, that is true, takes our children's souls. That's from the Walkers. They're agreeing with you in terms of the internet, and Lori is one of the educators there in Maryland, and she's agreeing with you on the campus, some of the things that she has to encounter.
Abby, can I say one thing?
Surely.
I want to put out there, like Dr. Montgomery said, a lot of people think that schools have the power to help these students. We don't have the resources nor the power. Like she said, we turn it over to the parents. If the parents don't take heed to what is given, those kids come back into our schools. They can come back. The parents can ignore the requests for help, and those children are still around. Our only hope is that when we do give resources, we do give lead ways, We do the 5250. Well, the 5250 is different from the 5150.
Longer
When-
time.
Yeah, when we do those things, the parents take heed. They only go out for a certain amount of time, and then they show proof that they did what was requested, then they come back.
Yes.
If the family doesn't do the long-term follow-up, we as teachers, principals, staff of the building have to take those children back. And we
Yes.
have to be cognizant, but we don't know, we can't put out the triggers, we can't put out anything into the school system because of the FERPA laws,
Yeah, you
HIPAA
don't
laws
know.
and everything. So when people try to blame schools, they don't understand the logistics
Dynamics. Mhm.
and dynamics of what schools have to follow in order for all babies to be safe in an environment. I just wanted to
agree.
put that out there.
I agree, Lori, 100%.
Thank you, Lori. I appreciate that. One more comment or question from anyone? Well, there's been a lot that has been said, and certainly there are.
It's an SJ, and it says some families do not have the financial resources for mental health treatment. Now a lot of programs, you can always tap into the free programs through the county. That's what I try to make sure, because for mental health, they do have certain things now, criteria that they will give you the resources and the help that you need. But we also have to, like I said, churches don't have to. I did my whole dissertation. Churches have to step up as well, and getting the resources. Some of their, if they are, I know we have a lot of small churches, but we need to start looking at resources also to help families as far as dealing with mental health. I know that a lot of people are referred to the county, and they have a lot of, things that they're trying to do as far as, now I'm not going to say it's going to be great mental health support, but it's somewhat that they can get some kind of help through the county. Yeah.
And we know that Loma Linda
Yeah.
Behavioral Health is offering their services. I've seen their information out a couple different places as it pertains to being a resource for individuals to obtain more information. And we have some individuals who offer support services in terms of grief share. And sometimes I understand that triggers certain things. So there's a grief share group at the Kansas Avenue, Seventh-day Adventist Church. And then there is a hotline that is available. I think it's still available, as I understand it, at Mount Ruto, Seventh-day Adventist Church. And there are other mental health awareness individuals that the church can refer to you, Dr. Wendy Ray and Dr. Glenn Scott. These are some individuals that have made themselves available, and if not, their offices can refer you. It is a problem that seems to be mounting. So grateful for your willingness to share, Dr. Montgomery, as well as others thought the need to have a mental awareness month. Clearly, there are things that we should be conscientious of, and who knows, we may have to encounter it personally ourselves at some point in time. I want to thank you, Dr. Montgomery, for sharing. Absolutely, there's a custom that we have, and that is to offer prayer for our special guest and for what it is that you're encountering. And then I have two announcements, so stand by if you would, please. And I'm going to ask, Chief, would you mind offering prayer for her?
Sure. Our heads, our kind and gracious Heavenly Father, we are so thankful to have someone like Dr. Montgomery come on to share with us her experience dealing with mental health, and also giving us some insight as to what mental health looks like and what we can do ourselves if we find ourselves in a situation. All of us have at some point in time dealt with someone that may have a crisis or some type of mental health issue. And we want to thank her for allowing us to share her story, and allow that with that story, it will help us to be able to recognize individuals in our families or individuals that we may encounter out in the public that some type of mental health issue is at hand. And thank you for allowing her to help us, help everyone who is on this call today to be able to have learned something from this lecture in understanding mental health in every way. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you for joining us once again. It has been so nice to have this time of fellowship with you. May the Lord bless and keep you and cause his face to shine upon you and grant you and yours peace. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other. For more information about this program, This Is My Story, Testimonies That Move the Soul, see us at our website. We look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.